KHZTV.com, plays on WAMD Aberdeen, WKHZ Easton, and WYRE Annapolis, Baltimore. It's 12:02, and KHZTV is proud to present Haunted Whispers, presented by Bully Bling Energy Drink. Now here's your host, Bill Hartley.
Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Haunted Whispers. I'm Bill Hartley, founder and lead investigator of the Greater Maryland Paranormal Society, and today I'm privileged enough to have Tish Martinez here with me. Tish Martinez is a former client of my team, and she was also featured in an episode of Psychic Kids that aired in 2010. Her and her daughters. And your house is in Crofton?
Yes.
Yes. So let's get into it. Tell me about when you first started experiencing paranormal activity in your home.
It's been quite a while ago, probably about 9 years ago it started, something like that, in about 04, 05. And yeah, about that time. And the girls were, well, you know, at that time they were about 8, 9, and 12, something about that. Yeah, somewhere around there. And
tell me, what was the first signs of activity that you noticed that was prevalent?
I think there were a lot of things going on that you try to ignore, but then the biggest thing that happened was we had a loft area off my bedroom. We do still, obviously, and I actually heard crying from there. The other things would be like things moving around. You'd hear noises. You know, the girls' toys would be moved. All kinds of things. But the biggest thing was crying. What sounded like a little girl crying in the loft area when no one was up there.
Right. And you said you heard voices. Can you tell me a little bit more detail into that?
Well, the only voice we heard at first for a while was the little girl.
Okay.
And it would be crying. You'd hear her. She would call Mommy, Mommy, and I would think it was Katie and run upstairs. And obviously there was no one there. Katie was downstairs. So that was the very first voice that we ever heard.
Okay. And since after the little girl voice, you started hearing other voices.
Yeah. We had a lot more, well, what I call kind of severe or really in-your-face things that happened to Katie and Christina primarily. But the voices, actually, we didn't hear another voice probably, other than the little girl, until we started hearing a male voice, which was prior to when we got a hold of you.
Okay. And the other experiences that happened leading up to us would have been...
Yeah, some of the biggies were, for example, the girls would actually call out to me at night. For example, I remember Christina once calling me on her phone, petrified, screaming like in a hushed voice, just petrified, and she had singing in her room, and I went over there, I tried to calm her. She was telling me that there was a little girl on her floor, and that's where the singing was coming from. So we went over there, and then the singing started again from behind us. So
and this is something you heard too. This wasn't nothing that the kids
were
hearing.
No. This was something I heard also, and things like Katie also. And usually things happen around 9:30 or 2:30 in our house, and that's still true. Katie would literally call me one night, and we've all experienced this, but the first one was Katie, where literally her bed was shaking.
Okay.
Bizarre, something like out of a movie, where literally her bed would be shaking, and she was calling me. Again, they had cell phones, so they'd call me screaming. They wouldn't get out of bed. So these were some of the severe, what I call severe.
Right, sure. And that kind of progressed. I remember once we got into the investigation, there was, I believe at that point, they were believing there was 2 to 3 different separate entities in your house. Now,
right.
You know the male one because you heard the male voice, and you know the child's voice, but let's discuss the third one, the woman's voice.
Yeah, I never heard the woman. The woman was more an experience, I think. For example, we figured there was a little girl. We heard her. We figured there was a male entity because we heard that. But the woman was never really apparent except for things that would happen. For example, Christina was crying one night and literally heard someone comforting her. I say comfort like a shh sound, and actually touching her hand. Right. So those kinds of experiences.
Yeah, that's I think one of the conversations that stands out in my head is that it seemed like that the mother, we called her the motherly figure because it always seems to manifest itself when she was upset.
Right.
And it always seems to have always been there in a comforting state.
Absolutely.
As opposed to the male or the child. Like the child was just, calling out for mommy and
playful.
Yeah. And
moving things.
Yeah, and the male voice always seemed to be more on the grumpy side. Is it fair to say? Maybe a little
Yeah,
more
the male.
agitated?
Well, what started happening prior to when we got a hold of you, which is why I got a hold of you, is I started to feel fear, and that was different. And so one night I remember we heard banging downstairs,
Okay.
and I walked down the steps and I continued. I heard another banging in the basement, so I went to the top of the steps, and what happened at that time was I literally, in my ear, heard, I could not tell what was being said, but it was a very deep, garbled something, words, and that petrified me, which is then why we got a hold of you. But then my girls wouldn't even go to the basement. You would actually feel it was oppressive, actually.
Right.
It was very oppressive, and that was scary.
Right. And what eventually you got a hold of us, but what is exactly led up to you actually coming to call on us? You know, because there's always
Right.
that catalyst. Cause
Yes.
I've noticed over the years dealing with clients that some clients will deal with things for years and sometimes even decades before that one instance happens, and it's like, oh, well, now I've really got to reach out and talk to someone.
Right.
So what was it with you guys? Was it the fear? Was there something else that had happened that propelled you over to the edge where you're like, well, now I got to talk to someone?
Yeah, I think it was two things. The fear for me, because at that point I started to feel like, okay, first of all, I don't know if we're okay, if we're safe. This is scary. The other thing was really, I think, very much Christina's reaction to what was going on. She literally could not sleep at night because of the activity.
Sure.
When you're being touched and talked to and you hear voices and you're a little kid, it's scary.
Right.
And so she was petrified. She would have to put her music in her ears at night. She still has a habit to do that because there's still things going on.
Sure.
And I think her just wanting to move, I mean, really, we considered moving. And so that fear and her reaction was like, this is really severe.
Right. And that was, anytime when someone comes to us and say, well, I've got kids that are involved and this is what's happening to them, we usually put them right on the top of the list as far as
Right.
coming out and investigating and everything else. And I remember coming out to visit you all for the first time.
Right.
And we sat down and talked in your living room, and Christina didn't want to take part in it. In fact, I didn't even think you even told her we were coming at that point.
Right.
She had no idea we were going to be there, but Katie was there, I believe.
Right.
And we sat down and we discussed all that was going on, and we decided, well, yeah, this obviously is something that needs to be pushed up, and we need to come out and do what we can do to try
Right.
to help you.
Right.
So then, actually, I wrote it down so I make sure I remember it. We actually came out to your house on November 14th of 2009 in Crofton, Maryland, for our investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your perceptions of investigating? I mean, going into it, because how did you actually know to call paranormal investigators? I mean, was it something you'd seen on TV or?
Honestly, I just started looking. I can't remember if it was the web or what I started doing, but I just was like, I've got to get a hold of somebody. And I don't know how it happened. It's there you are.
Yeah.
So you just happened to be there, thank God.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, and I had to reach out. And I remember when you came, it was like breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief, because it was like, okay,
Yeah.
we're going to get help, because we needed help.
Yeah, and it's most people don't understand, and this is kind of one of the reasons why I kind of like the idea of doing this kind of show and talking to clients like yourself, because there is a certain stigmata attached to paranormal investigations. A lot of people fall into the realm of, well, I see it on TV, so that must be how it's going to work out,
Right.
And then there are some clients like yourself that didn't come to us via, I got a great idea for a TV show. You
Right.
actually showed up by just Googling us.
Right, absolutely. That was it, because we needed you.
Right. And I found that a lot of times, let me ask you this. Before us coming out and doing our thing,
Mm-hmm.
and before you became internationally known as the Martinez family on Psychic Kids, did you ever discuss what was going on in your house to outsiders, neighbors, friends, other family?
I only ever one time, prior to getting a hold of you, asked my neighbor if anything weird happened in their house. Because we are in a townhouse. So my
Right.
thought was, if we have spirits, don't they, I don't know. It was really bizarre. And he said, once in a while, but we ignore it. So I
There it
didn't go
goes,
anywhere
yeah.
else with it. And
Yeah.
so, no, we didn't talk to anybody, because you're afraid people will think you're crazy, because prior to this, it's like, yeah, I think I believe in spirits, but really until it's in your face, wow.
Right.
It's a totally different thing.
Yeah, and believe it or not, it's still only about 35-40% of Americans believe in the existence of ghosts or paranormal. And having you here to tell them, yes, this is what's happened and I've experienced it firsthand, it's an incredible thing.
They can come to my house.
Now, during our investigation, I distinctly remember a few small instances. One of them, one of our investigators who was on her team at the time named Lori, excuse me, she had sat in this chair in your living room near this clock. Now, one of the things you had said was the alarm clock, well, it was a clock radio that was there, would actually turn itself on at certain times and play music. And I remember her coming in, we had dinner. All of us had dinner. We came into your house. Everyone felt fine. We felt a little full. We were ready to, settle in and do a nice cold winter's investigation. And she sat in that corner near that chair for about a minute or two, and she felt deathly ill, and she actually had to drop out of the investigation.
I remember that. Yeah, she actually left.
Yeah,
and then I think she called you a few minutes later to say that she felt okay.
Yeah, she was about 5-10 minutes down the road, and she's calling me saying, I feel good. And I'm like, well, go home.
Right.
Because whatever's affecting you is only affecting you, and, I don't want you to come back and dropping out.
Right.
I also remember during the investigation, one of the instances that happened was, now I was sitting down at base, and I was sitting with your daughter, Katie, and we were discussing, equipment and flashlights and why we're doing what we're doing, because, obviously, it's a new world for people when they see us come out and do this sort of thing. And, here we are sitting in your house in the middle of the night and all dark, and we're using flashlights that are black lighted and everything else. So I'm trying to explain this to her while we're doing this and doing that. And at one point, Jim Stoner, who was a guest here last week, yelled down the steps asking, was any of us taking flash photography?
Right.
And we said no, and then he came down and described that while they were up, and I believe it was either your bedroom or one of the bedrooms close to the hallway, they experienced light anomalies.
Right.
Flashes that he thought would have been like someone taking, photographs.
Right.
But none of us have been taking them, so that was one of our personal experiences.
Right.
Fortunately, it didn't show up on any video, but, it was good enough for me. He come down and tell me this is what happened.
Right.
Now, during the investigation itself, I know we caught a couple of EVPs, and I want to take the time to play a couple of them for you. I know it's been a while since you've probably listened to them since our investigation. And 3 of the 4 that we're going to play were featured on Psychic Kids, though you may not have heard it too well because they gave me a MacBook that wasn't mine, and I had no idea how to use it. Oh. So it was horrible. So the first EVP I would like to play, we believe was the male voice in the house. And as you'll hear as it plays, it sounds like it's asking for a chair.
I need a chair. I need a chair.
That male voice was what we believe was the grump of the house.
Right, and the connection to the chair was that in the basement where the computer was, there seemed to be, we're assuming something with the computer because the screen was always on.
Right.
And the chair downstairs, we called him the chairman because we figured he sat in the chair.
Right.
And at that moment when you got that, there were other investigators with you that were downstairs sitting in that chair.
Right.
So.
The next one I want to play, we believe, was the small child. And as you said, many times you heard the child saying that it sounded like it was listening or talking or trying to find his mommy. So when we got this was already a great find for us. So play the next one. It's one of those things that it sends chills up your spine because it just comes out of nowhere.
Right, especially when we've heard it for, prior to that in the house.
Yeah,
but
this is the best part about when this type of field is when I'm actually able to find a bit of evidence that actually, let alone sounds similar to what you're experiencing, but be dead on.
Right.
I mean,
Absolutely.
you couldn't get any more dead on than that.
Right.
And that was incredible for us. Now, as I talked about before, when I was sitting at base, which was in your living room,
right.
We had a voice recorder set in your kitchen, which there was a window between the two.
Right.
And I was showing Katie the flashlights. And one of them was a black light.
Right.
You tend to use black light for... It doesn't affect the camera so much.
Right.
And but there's also something that people believe that some black lights actually hurt or push off energy or spirits. So, and at the time, I just got it because I thought it was, a new cool flashlight for the team. And I hadn't heard that part of it, that aspect or that theory of it yet. Now, when I was flashing it into the kitchen, showing her how the black light doesn't affect the camera so much and everything else, we caught an EVP of a man who actually tells me that it's hurting his eyes, if you could. And I thought that was
cool.
incredible.
That was cool.
That was so incredible. And then we went to thinking about the woman.
Yeah.
And she made an appearance too. And she was actually, now I'm not quite sure if she was referring to the little girl that we believe to be an entity in your house, or referring to one of your daughters. But it flat out says, and there's a little bit of talking, then you hear her voice, it'll say a small girl. And that one was another incredible find for us.
Right.
You know, and when you come out of investigations, a lot of times you're happy if you get 1 or 2 EVPs, and sometimes it's usually just a rattle or some sort of sound that you just can't pinpoint exactly what it was. But this was flat out voices. Yeah. Now, we never caught any photographs of anything in there. We never caught anything on video. But I do remember during the investigation you having a piano in the basement. And during the investigation, someone heard what sounded like someone strumming one of the keys.
Right. And that was something typical that would happen. Yeah, definitely.
And so that was another one of those things. It's like, well, I wish we would have caught it on audio or something like that. But still, it was heard by everybody.
Right.
You know, because I remember being upstairs and hearing plung. And I'm like, who's playing with the piano downstairs? And at that point, no one had gone down.
Right.
So that's when we all went downstairs to look. You know, of course, nothing was there.
Right.
But that was a lot of fun. Now let's talk about Psychic Kids, where you became an international star.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. I remember the production company calling me, and what was going on is they were going to be in Maryland filming an episode that ended up being, like, I think, episode 3 or 4 of season 3. And this show was actually called Bloody Maryland. And they were like, well, we know about your team, and we wanted to find out if you had any clients who, one, would agree to be on camera,
right?
You know, which is the hard part, because you know almost all of our clients are confidential,
right?
Which is why it's very hard for me to come anywhere and actually discuss specific cases,
right?
But they were like, someone who can come on camera and might benefit from having chip coffee, come on, and if needed, bless the house, basically, try to end everything that's happening there. And when they came to me, you were top of the list, and I remember calling you, and you had concerns, which obviously you should.
Sure.
You know, because it's not like you and so are going to be on TV, but now you're asking to put your underage kids on TV.
Right.
Who are still in school.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And knowing that you probably, even after our investigation, really haven't told the world about what's going on in there.
Not at all.
Yeah.
No one really knew at that point, and I didn't even tell them about the episode.
Right.
People haven't even learned that till the last few years.
Oh, wow.
A lot of people, except for a few that saw us and like flipped out.
Yeah. So while I thought, well, I know you were concerned, and your children were concerned about what was going on in there, particularly
Christina.
The Christina.
Yeah.
And the shaking of the bed and being disturbed while she's sleeping and stuff like that. So obviously I thought, well, maybe you might benefit from it. So I called you. And again, you were hesitant.
Right.
And we talked a little bit, and then you agreed.
Right.
And so I told them, and we started from there. Now, the actual filming part of it, there's a whole weekend that I filmed at your house that never showed up anywhere. It never showed up anywhere, which is why I should never be on camera, because every time I end up on camera, it just goes bad. So, so we go to your house and we film for a week. Now, in the, say, about a year since we investigated, obviously more things had happened in your house.
Right.
You had a dresser in the upstairs that had got pushed over.
Right.
And, my first thing as an investigator is I'm going to go up and I'm going to try to figure out what's going on. Now, mind you, I'm still not a thin man, but I was at least 100 pounds heavier at the time of the show and the investigation.
Right.
And so I'm figuring, well, if my butt can bounce around this thing and topple it over, then maybe we can rule it out. Now, I tried everything I could, and I couldn't get that thing to move. Yeah. I even tried pulling it, and I felt a little weak, because frankly, it wouldn't pull away from the wall. But you had it fall over, and it was clearly there was visible damage to it. One of the drawers was broken and everything else.
Right.
And you had a couple other things that had happened since then that I chose not to tell the producers.
Right.
Because, again, I have my own thoughts and processes on psychics. I mean, I've never dealt with one that I believed. I want to believe, and I'm willing to work with anybody who can actually show me proof that they are psychics.
Right.
They have the ability. So, in my mind, I thought, well, I'm not going to tell anybody, because if they're going to bring psychics into this house, I want to see if they pinpoint it. So, after the 2 days of filming, me wrenching my knee and telling one of your neighbors we were filming a butter commercial,
Yeah, I don't know what they thought.
They wanted us
was
to.
crazy.
They wanted us to film outside of your house. I guess they do like 10 or 15 questions of me saying, "Well, I'm a ghost hunter, and it's my name is," and stuff like that. And this woman's walking up the street with her dog, and she's staring at us and staring at us. And then she'd come back around, and she reluctantly asked, well, "What are you doing?" And of course, the guy said, "We're filming a butter commercial." And she's like, "Oh, okay," and walks off. I don't know, but apparently that's the standard for them. Is when
Evidently,
yeah,
maybe.
So we did all this. It didn't air on the show, but what did happen was they gave me a bunch of photographs of you and the kids in the house. And the second thing they did is, I guess they left you a couple of camcorders to film yourselves.
Right. Yes. Gosh, I almost forgot that. That's right. Oh my goodness.
How
we had
did
to
that
do
work
that.
out?
Oh,
Because
wow.
I remember seeing
bizarre.
the very little footage they put on.
Right.
And
Yeah, we had to go through the house and talk about the different areas in the house and what was going on and things like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I remember very
that.
distinctly at that point too. Christina really still was not on board with the idea of it, and basically the whole filming of the show and if we were going to use anything from there and all hinged on her switching over and saying, "Yeah, I'm going to
being
go ahead
okay
and do
with
it." Yeah.
that. Right.
Yeah. So when she reluctantly did it and she agreed to do it, and she did the video, and she seemed fine on the video. She really did seem fine on the video. So the following weekend, I go out and I meet with Chip Coffey and Anissa and Nick from Psychic Kids at this bed and breakfast in Annapolis. And one of the first things they had me do, and I'm so mad that they didn't show it on TV, is they had me show them all your all's pictures.
Oh, okay.
That was one of the first things. When you
Right.
see me at the table and all that stuff, my first thing was I presented all the pictures that was taken at the house.
Oh, okay.
What they had to do was read over in their minds
Sure.
what they're picking up on all the pictures. Outside of the house, inside of the house, different rooms,
Okay.
you guys.
Right.
And they all went to different parts of the bed and breakfast. You know, we all went to their own separate rooms with a notepad and a marker. And they had to sit down and write impressions.
Wow.
What they picked up, what they thought, what they thought was going on.
With
And
just the pictures.
Just the pictures.
Right.
Not being discussed, because apparently up until the morning I showed up, Chip Coffey and the kids had no idea that this part was happening.
Okay.
Because as far as I was aware, up until that episode, they've never brought on an investigator to actually take someone to an investigation site that was active.
Okay.
I mean, they've taken them to different places. I know that during the series, they would take them to like old buildings, or even even the show that we were on. They took them to a historic building in Annapolis, Maryland, to do their thing, and that was kind of how the show ran. For them to pull them out of their environment into ours was a whole new concept for them.
Totally different.
Yeah. So when they got the readings, the kids come back. I would say about 90% of what they had written down was verbatim on every notepad.
Wow.
And to me, that was impressive.
Wow.
Because, mind you, at that point, I had never worked with any psychics that actually can tell me anything. And I'm watching them, and they're picking up stuff. They pick up the dresser.
Right.
They pick up the dresser, and there was something going on in that dresser. Now, mind you, I hadn't thought about it until I went back and started going over our notes from that original investigation. But that same corner where that dresser was sitting, we got a picture of a handprint in the glass.
Right, the little girl.
And it was too small for anyone in the house.
It was very small, yeah.
And that handprint is right in the same corner where that had happened. And then although they mentioned the dresser, they mentioned the handprint. So I'm sitting here blown away by all this whole thing. And then they wanted me to play the EVPs for them and kind of discuss a little bit about what I do and about your investigation and you guys. So, you know, then they hand me this MacBook and asked me to play the EVPs, which I couldn't do. I don't know how to use a MacBook. I'm sitting here, I think this is how it works. But we played the EVPs and all that stuff. And then it was one of those things, too, that when it was done, because to be fair, Psychic Kids, as the show, has taken a lot of flack while it was on air, and probably since. People talking about it being exploitive on kids.
Okay.
You know, and I can tell you that from the time I walked into that environment until the last day we filmed, I never saw any of that. I mean, Chip Coffey and Edie Nathan were as closely working with these kids as a parent would.
Absolutely.
You know, they were very attentive to the kids. They were walking them through it when they came to the house.
Absolutely.
To your house for the investigation. They were constantly reminding them, don't be afraid. If you're afraid, we'll take you out of the house. Chip Coffey says to me, off camera, he says, Bill, I need to know that you're not putting these kids in any danger in this house. They said, now you've done this investigation there. Is there anything that we need to worry about? Because if it is, I won't want them coming out.
Right.
And of course, I told him if I thought there was any physical danger of any kind there, I would never have even agreed to have the kids come out.
Right.
So now we're at the night of the filming. Now, the filming was an interesting night.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Because the filming gave the illusion that it was me and, Edie and the kids and Chip Coffey and Elise, a member of our staff.
Yes.
Who made a 30-second cameo on the show.
Mm-hmm.
That was all that was in the house. But had they ever panned towards your kitchen, there was like 30 people standing in your kitchen.
I've never had that many people in my house.
I didn't know, that a floor could hold that many people in one spot. And it was
crazy.
They had cameras and soundboards and monitors and everything else, and they're all standing in this little kitchen. And the illusion is everybody's just walking through the house by themselves. Now, as an investigator, I'm telling you, it's very weird to turn a corner and see a guy with a camera filming you.
Right.
And then have to act like it's not there.
Right.
So,
it was bizarre.
During the filming, where did you go? Were you in the kitchen with everybody else?
I think so. I mean, I'm trying to even remember it all. It was so crazy. It was just so overwhelming, really, with all those people. Like, I didn't even realize there would be that many people. So, yeah, I think I was in the kitchen a good part of the time. When there were times when I could be somewhere else, I would be. But, yeah,
right.
I was pretty much in I remember being in the kitchen a lot of it.
Yeah, and I think that was the case with a lot of people.
Right.
Now, I guess the one thing I always mention about that it kind of maybe cheeses me off a little bit is the one or few times that the K2 meter went off. Mm-hmm. They filmed it, and it looked incredible because we had given the kids the equipment, and they were using it, and the thing's flickering, and they're getting excited by it. And mind you, at this point, the kids had lost all fear. They were now total ghost hunters at that point. I think I could have put them in the next case, and they would have been happy to go. But when it flickered, it looked great on camera. It really did, and it looked good on the show. But then I find out after the filming, when we're all standing down in your living room, everybody's starting to come out of that kitchen a little bit, that one of my members comes up and says, every time you got a K2 hit, one of the guys on the film crew was radioing up, talking about where they were going to go and get a beer after the filming and stuff like that. So, so it shows on camera. I guess it makes good TV. But Psychic Kids airing, where did you watch it?
Wow. I'm trying to remember the first time I did watch it. I guess when it came on TV, we watched it. Yeah. And then we all watched it together at some point. But yeah, it was crazy, and it was really hard. Actually, it was hard to watch because it was bizarre. For me, it was really bizarre to see it. Right. And then, of course, it's edit. It's not everything that you do or
it's almost nothing of what I did.
So it's right. I know. So you're like, wow. But yeah, it was crazy watching it, and I don't even know when the girls. At some point, we watched it together, but not initially.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I know for us, we all got together at Lori's house and had like I guess sort of a mini birthday party for me, and we watched the episode and all that stuff. And most of the time we're watching because I don't think I show up until more than halfway in, and we're like, I am in this one, right?
Yeah.
We're in this episode. So we went ahead and we did the actual filming and all that good stuff. To your mind, because of the flack that the show got, do you or your family feel in any way exploited from being on the show?
No, I mean, as a matter of fact, first of all, I think the whole experience was really phenomenal for us. Regardless of what it did for anybody else or what show it was, it didn't matter. The point was for us was that we had 2 children, that the Psychic Kids who came, that literally were near my daughter's ages, Katie and Christina.
Right.
And therefore, that alone for my kids to have other children that are experiencing things or that do, it was really cool, because that's the hard part. Yeah. You feel like you're in this alone, and it was just phenomenal.
And
what
for
they
me,
did for us.
I came away with watching the episode because having been a part of it, I'm only coming in halfway through. I'm not through most of the journey that they take before getting to us.
Right.
And I was kind of amazed by how different the kids were once you met them in person, because when you first watch the episode, you really think that they're really terrified kids.
Right.
They're experiencing this stuff. Their families are trying to find help, but they've been with Chip and Edie for those couple of days before us. Amazing work that they've done, because those kids were very centered and grounded when we were working with them.
They were. It was almost like they were. It was cool. They were there. But the cool thing was, like, they were there. It almost felt like they were there to help. They were there to identify what they could. And it was just invaluable. It was really cool.
And then you astounded us, because when we actually did the before the filming, it was brought up that you would have Chip Coffey come in and basically cleanse your house, chase whatever's there out. Now, when it came to actual filming, you told me I don't want it to happen. Explain why you didn't want it to happen.
I don't know. That's really a bizarre it's bizarre because, first of all, it's not just me, it's the kids. And I know this is going to sound strange, but we lived with it for so long. So in other words, really bizarre. You have children who have a little girl in the house,
yes,
even though you might not see her, but she's playing with their toys, she moves things, she cries, she does this, she does that. You have a woman, you have a man. I mean, so the point was, when I presented this as a possibility to my children, we all didn't want to do it at that point. It was almost like you were getting rid of people that you let live in your house.
Right. I believe you actually even kind of said that you kind of think of them as sort of like extra family members at that point.
Yeah, which is crazy, right?
Yeah. Now let's talk about since the filming real quickly. Tell me, experiences still going on in your house?
We do. It's more, it's not always as heavy duty in your face as it was, but it definitely is. You still, you don't hear as much as far as voices, but definitely the noises, the moving, things moving around, banging of cabinets. I mean, it's still that kind of thing in the house. Right. Not as intense as it was. So it's less than it was, but it's still there. Sometimes the bed will still shake. There's still those things that will happen. The one thing that's probably different for me is I don't feel as often the presence of chairman or the male.
Right.
I don't know if it's because my computer now, we had to move my computer up to my room,
okay,
which is then where I started getting a lot of activity after that happened. And I was thinking that was the attraction for him.
Right.
And it was really frustrating. You would literally have to, like Katie always reminds me, you have to tell them to stop, or you have
right,
to tell them not to do this tonight.
Right. And for us as investigators, we call that taking back your house. We always recommend that to clients when the activity they feel is kind of out of hand, is you got to put your foot down and you got to say, look, this is my house, this is my place. If you're here, that's fine, but don't do this. Kind of lay down ground rules. Like, so if you just had an unruly child,
Absolutely.
And I know it's sometimes for people who are not in the field or probably have never experienced it, it might sound a little off because it's like, whoa, you're yelling at empty air. Who are you yelling at? But for people like yourself who've experienced it, and you know that it sometimes, it doesn't always help, but sometimes it does.
Well, I think it does. And Katie's the one that reminded me of that, and she got that from you, of course. She would tell me that. She's like, Mom, you have to say this, and it'll help because I do it, Well, and so it does help. Right. It usually does help, I don't know if it helps her or if she remembers to do it because she has a lot of stuff that goes on up in the loft yet and in her closet and whatnot.
Right.
But we do it, and it helps some.
Good. Thank you for coming out. I really appreciate you coming all the way up here and taking the time to discuss this, and again, putting yourself out in the public eye. I'm Bill Hartley, reminding you that if you feel tired at a ghost hunt, make sure you have some Bully Blink energy drink. I know I'm going to have one in just a couple minutes.
I'll join you.
Yes, please. And this has been another episode of Haunted Whispers with GHB, Ghost Hunting Bill Hartley, your Palomino paranormal personality. And we'll see you next time. Have a great day.